Ren from Hallowed Be Thy Game, and today I'm going to share with you my review of Metal Max Xeno Reborn for the Nintendo Switch. Let's check it out. Welcome back to another episode of Hallowed Be Thy Game, and today I'm excited to share with you my full review of Metal Max Xeno Reborn for the Nintendo Switch. T-Cube was kind enough to send me a review code, but all thoughts shared today are my own. I had this game pre-ordered before, and now I still have it pre-ordered, and let me tell you why. Story and characters. Metal Max Xeno Reborn, or as I now refer to it as My New Addiction, is a post-apocalyptic JRPG that essentially takes the world of Mad Max and mashes it with the JRPG aesthetic. The story follows the adventures of Talus, who is a monster hunter hell-bent on destruction. He is definitely rough around the edges, but he eventually builds a team of misfits to upgrade their tanks and conquer the Wasteland. The game may advertise that Talus is the main character, but just a heads up, this Poochie right here is the true MVP and genuinely mankind's best friend. You can pet this dog, you can also teach him tricks. 10 out of 10 game, thanks for watching, have fun in the Wasteland. If you are someone who only plays games for fun story and character growth, then I would caution you, but I will also say that Metal Max Xeno Reborn is absurdly addictive. But all kidding aside, I've been kind of taken aback by this game, as it is a long-running series in Japan that started in like the early 1990s, but has rarely and only recently started coming out in the West. Metal Max Xeno for the PS4, which was the game this appears to be a reimagining of, was a turn-based RPG that is widely considered a hidden gem on the console. And I can see why, because I think this game is on the same path. It is very solid and well put together. Graphics and performance. I want to say that it took me roughly 15 to 20 hours to get a single clear of the final boss in Metal Max Xeno Reborn. The game truly comes alive in New Game Plus, however, but in that time I did have one hard crash in the game. I was really surprised because even though there's not a much in the way of outstanding visuals in this barren wasteland, the frame rate holds up well, and I had no noticeable slowdown in my entire playthrough of the game. And also the character models for your party members are shockingly well done. I love the animations for combat in and out of the tanks, and I found that exploring the dark caves was a lot of fun, and the lighting effects that come from the characters' flashlights are presented extremely well. Again, I did have that one hard crash that caused me to lose some time, but it was only in a spot about 2/3 the way through the game, and I never had issues outside of that. You can also save at any point in this game from the menu screen, so that kind of gave me a little bit of reassurance. Music. The open world and battle theme are really catchy here and kind of eerie vibe to them, but the main theme of the game has vocal tracks to it, and it's definitely something I want to keep listening to. I liked it a lot. All in all, the tracks get your blood flowing and help to add to the intoxicating feeling of firing missiles at giant dinosaurs equipped with battleships. Combat and power progression. The gameplay loop hit a lot of addictive receptors in my brain, as the combat and power progression are split up in between ground and tank combat. Let me be crystal clear. This game's heart and soul and 95% of my enjoyment came from the unique combat and power progression loop. There will be sections of the game where you and your party have to infiltrate a complex or perhaps a giant bug colony, so you're going to have to hop out of your tanks and then rely on guns, rockets, and melee weapons to take on a diverse set of enemies. I was pleasantly surprised at the fun designs to monsters that are in this game. They're trippy but very fun to fight. There is a bit of a learning curve, as combat for melee and tanks follows an ATB system, but time will stop if you turn off auto combat, and it will allow you to plan and choose your attacks with a stop time. When you are out in the wilds, everything has a threat meter, and when they see you or you get in their line of sight, it'll start to build. You have time while this meter builds to preemptively strike the enemy by selecting an attack and then aiming with your tank physically, almost kind of like a first-person shooter. If you build your squad and tanks correctly, you can clear entire sections this way without ever having to take a hit. It's so satisfying. This was nice because I could just choose what abilities I wanted my team to do, and then I would just ride around and auto battle and blow things up and farm resources. And this would tickle my desire to be anime Mad Max. As you encounter enemies, they will have affinity weaknesses such as a vulnerability to frost or fire attacks, so then you can equip your ground forces and also your cannons or machine guns to have those affinity modifiers on them. So as you're out and exploring the Wasteland, you will get notifications when you enter a new map from home base, and they'll let you know that there are certain giant monsters in that area that can be taken down as a bounty reward called Wanted Quests that reward a huge amount of money. This is essentially where you'll get a giant chunk of money where you can go back and upgrade your power levels for your tank or just upgrade new equipment and such like that to where you and your doggy can take over the Wasteland. Yes, there is quite a bit of strategy and planning that can go into your team, so if you are concerned that this game may be a little too mindless, don't worry, there's definitely some strategy there. I do want to reassure people that might be off-put that this game might be too hard. I am going to be releasing a tips and tricks video of things I wished I had known earlier in the game, and you can expect that coming out in the coming days. In the beginning, you will find a tank that has the most minimum of loadouts, but as you destroy monsters and find resources, you're going to be able to upgrade that gear on your tanks, which is where you're going to find a lot of the enjoyment that Metal Max has to offer. The feeling when you finally take on that giant monster in the world for a wanted quest and it rewards you with this giant stack of cash, it's just exhilarating when you go back. You have 5 weapon ports on each of your tanks that can be outfitted with anything from guns, lasers, RPGs. There's a wide gambit of things, but then you also have chip modifiers that you can put in that add damage bonuses and such like that. Just to give an example, my final loadout for the game is I had a tank that was loaded out with 5 giant monster cannons, and then I put in modifiers that would allow me to increase the damage of my cannons, but also allow all my cannons to fire at once. As you level up in the game, you are going to obtain skill points that can be spent on every single one of your playable characters, and these can essentially make it to where your tanks are more effective, increase your survivability, or just ensure that you do more damage while outside of your tanks. And from my testing in the game, I found this to be very forgiving with its difficulty to allow for any type of customization you might be interested in with the game's default difficulty. There are no difficulty options until you beat the game at least once, and then you can up the difficulty from normal to hard. And you can even change it to survival mode, which removes the ability to restore your party's health at base. So beware unless you are a glutton for a punishment. I also really appreciated that in New Game Plus, you can change the avatar's look back to how they were in the PS4 release of the game, which does have a more distinct anime feel to it as opposed to the default Western appearance this game has. It can feel a little intimidating at first with all the customization and upgrade options you have at your disposal, but again, I will be putting out a quick tips and tricks video in the coming days for those who may be interested. Needless to say, it is a deep progression path, and once it clicks with you, the true satisfaction this game has comes into play. I personally felt constantly that the devs were passionate and they believed in the gameplay loop they created. So where this game lacked in story, it definitely shined brighter in the gameplay itself. The majority of the time you are playing this game, you will be driving around in a tank, and I did feel that controlling the tank was surprisingly well done. Right trigger is the gas to go forward, left trigger is to stop and to go in reverse, and you can look around and steer with the joysticks. There is a double-edged sword to combat in tanks, however. In the beginning, when your tanks are weaker, you will have a lot of instances where your tanks are outright destroyed, but you are always able to completely restore your tanks at the iron base free of charge. This was a great thing for quality of life because there is literally no penalty for trying to fight anything you come across in the game. However, it can get a little tedious traveling back to the base to restore your tanks and then traveling back to the action. You can quick travel and the points are very generous, but it still can be a little tedious. The only other things I wish were present would be more information on the minimap, because as you're exploring the Wasteland, you will find barriers that require a certain amount of power to destroy so you can progress, or maybe find a new secret, or perhaps even unlock a character. It would have been nice if these could have been marked on the minimap so I wouldn't have to rely on my kind of shoddy memory to remember where they were at. It is a nitpick for sure, but all in all, I was so addicted to upgrading my tanks and finding more bosses to kill that I barely noticed. This game does kind of give me the same feeling and vibes I have when I'm playing Xenoblade, where you find this giant scary monster and then you're just going to come back to it later when you can just wipe the floor with them, and that feeling is what hooked me so hard. Replay value. Metal Max Xeno Reborn is structured to be beaten and then to quite literally turn into a giant sandbox where you just scale in power. All bosses, including the final one, will respawn, and they will drop unique upgrade materials to create some of the most insanely cool looking tanks. I mean, you have a school bus outfitted with RPGs to go alongside your giant tank sporting 5 cannons. Mwah. The customization and upgrade paths are vast, and that kind of brings me full circle back to my final thoughts. Metal Max Xeno Reborn is just not going to be for everyone. What it lacks in a story and character growth, it definitely flexes its muscles with an extremely unique combat system supported by a fun power progression loop. I loved it, and in a gaming landscape where it can be harder and harder to find games with this unique feel and gameplay system, it's just an oasis in the desert. Get used to seeing this game on Hidden Gems list if it doesn't take off, but those are just my thoughts on Metal Max Xeno Reborn. Are you going to pick it up? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for liking and subscribing. I really appreciate the support on the channel. But what helps out the channel even more is letting me know your thoughts on Metal Max down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.